Good morning. Here we are, Ben and I, in my office here at Sparta UMC, recording this message for you on this Wednesday of the Lenten season. Thankful for Ben being able to be here and being willing to do this for us. It's a beautiful day outside. It just feels like spring is here. I'm not getting ahead of it, but it sure feels good. And this Sunday, of course, we're going to be back to limited in-person worship, and what a good thing that is. So if you're desiring of that, feel free to come visit with us Sunday. And just a reminder, we will be following all the guidance of social distancing and mask and no congregational hymns, but thank God at least we'll be back together and we'll continue to make progress towards full fellowship. Okay, I'd like to share with you from Paul's letter to the church at Ephesus, chapter 2, and I'll begin with verse 1. Some very important words here Paul has for us. As for you, you were dead in your transgressions and sins, in which you used to live when you followed the ways of this world and of the ruler of the kingdom of the air, the spirit who is now at work in those who are disobedient. All of us also lived among them at one time, gratifying the cravings of our flesh and following its desires and thoughts. Like the rest, we were by nature deserving of wrath. But because of his great love for us, God, who is rich in mercy, made us alive with Christ when we were dead in transgressions. It is by grace you have been saved. And God raised us up with Christ and seated us with him in the heavenly realms in Christ Jesus, in order that in the coming ages he might show the incomparable riches of his grace, expressed in his kindness to us in Christ Jesus. For it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not from yourselves, it is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. Wow. I read these words from the apostle, and they stop me dead in my tracks. They make me stop and think. It's almost like I feel my heart stop beating. And they are very personal words, just as Paul means for them to be. Certainly personal for me and personal for you. As he says, as for you, you were dead in your transgressions and sins, in which you used to live when you followed the ways of this world and of the ruler of the kingdom of the air, the spirit who is now at work in those who are disobedient. Paul certainly knew what he was talking about. And any and all of us who have been delivered from death and into life knows exactly what he is saying. We all, I would think, know what it's like to live a life of death. To have lived a life in which the only thing that really mattered was me, my wants, my needs, my pleasures, a life lived for self, and therefore a life lived in rebellion to God. And it tastes like an endless death, a constant recurrence of death. Living a stale, meaningless life that is punctuated with the things that temporarily make me feel good in and of themselves. And yet at the end of the day, or maybe the next morning when you wake up, it feels like death. Very personal words from Paul, and they strike me with a frightening depth into my heart. As for you, you were dead in your transgressions and sins. And I'll tell you what is so frightening to me about these words, for me. is I know me, and therefore I know just how easily I could slip back into the state of the living dead if I don't keep my mind and my heart focused on Jesus. The ways of the world are all around us, and they can dominate our lives if we don't have the right focus. I don't know, maybe I'm the only person on this earth that has these feelings and these crazy thoughts, but I shouldn't be. I don't think, for Paul goes on to say, all of us also lived among them at one time, gratifying the cravings of our flesh and following its desires and thoughts. Like the rest, we were by nature deserving of wrath. According to Paul, that is who I used to be, and that is who you used to be. But thanks be to God, that is not who I am now, and it is not who you are now. And here is the really wonderful good news for you and for me. Listen to this. But because of his great love for us, God, who is rich in mercy, made us alive with Christ, even when we were dead in our transgressions. Isn't it good to be alive? And I don't mean just physically. Certainly that is good. But to have been delivered from a life of rebellion towards God to a life of humble and grateful obedience, and therefore be able to be at peace with God and peace with oneself. Isn't it great to be alive? Paul sums it up so well when he says, "It is by grace that you have been saved." And furthermore, he tells us of a future event that has already happened. It's present now. And God raised us up with Christ and seated us with him in the heavenly realms in Christ Jesus, in order that in the coming ages he might show the incomparable riches of his grace expressed in his kindness to us in Christ Jesus. Wow. The incomparable riches of his grace. God's kindness to us in Christ Jesus. That will make your heart beat with thanksgiving. It will jumpstart your life. It will bring humble tears of joy flowing down your cheeks if you stop and think about it. I was dead, but because of God's great love, I am alive. For it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not from yourselves. It is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. Friends, we're all in the same boat. If we've accepted this wonderful gift, and it's the boat of God's saving grace, it's a gift. And what vivid imagery Paul uses, from death to life, made alive with Christ, raised up with Christ, sitting with Christ in the heavenly realms. That is who we are. And that is what God has done for us. And what God has done. And it's up to us to simply believe it, to exercise our faith in what God has done, and to know that we are forgiven. Forgiveness. What a powerful word that is. To just look at our human relationships, to have hurt someone intentionally or unintentionally. And to be able to ask for forgiveness. And to hear that person say, and to know that they mean it, I forgive you. That's transformative. Life-changing. And that is what God's grace is meant to do, to transform, to change our lives from self-filled lives to grace filled lives. Listen, if you will, to who we are now, if we have accepted God's kindness, God's love, God's gift. We are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. What a difference there is, what all the world of difference between doing good works as a means of trying to earn God's favor, trying to earn one's salvation, versus doing good works as a lifelong expression of thanksgiving. We're God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works. So good works themselves have now been transformed. Instead of frantic efforts to save ourselves, good works are the blessed opportunity to live out our lives that we were created for and destined to live. Our lives to be lived as an expression of Christ living in us, ministering to the world. Demonstrations of our present reality and our future reality. For it is by grace that you have been saved. God bless you. Thank you. I pray for you to have a good and healthy day.